The mist hung low over the river like a shroud muffling the world's edges as Theo stepped onto the weathered dock. His boots thudded softly against the splintered wood, each step a ritual etched into his bones, since Clara's absence had carved him hollow. The air tasted of damp pine and forgotten rain, cool fingers brushing his weathered face. He cast his line into the sluggish current, the plop of the lure swallowed by the water's murmur, a sound that once carried her laughter, but now only echoed his solitude. There on the bank, the German shepherd sat like a statue forged from shadow, its gaze locked on the river's depths. Theo's breath caught. The dog's stillness felt like a mirror reflecting the quiet unraveling inside him. What secrets did it guard in those unblinking eyes? He turned away, but the weight of its presence lingered, a faint thread, pulling at the frayed edges of his isolation. The riverbank stretched out in a tangle of moss-slick rocks and twisted roots, where pines loomed like silent guardians, their needles whispering secrets to the wind. The water churned lazily here, dark and opaque, hiding eddies that could pull a man under without a sound, much like the grief that had anchored Theo to this spot for years. He squinted through the haze, his eyes drawn again to the dog fur matted with dew ribs faintly visible under a coat scarred by old wounds, a faded collar dangling like a broken promise, no tags to claim its story. The air grew thicker, pregnant with the scent of impending rain thunder rumbling distant like a heartbeat quickening. Theo's line tugged idly, but his mind wandered to the dog's unyielding stare, as if the river held something it alone could see, a buried truth perhaps, or a ghost rising from the silt. The environment pressed in, desolate yet alive, mirroring the storm, brewing in Theo's chest, a loneliness that threatened to swallow him whole if he didn't turn back. Yet as the first drops fell pattering like hesitant fingers on the leaves, he felt the pull stronger, the dog's presence, a harbinger in the gathering gray. Theo's fingers tightened around the fishing rod, the cool metal grounding him as the river's murmur filled the void where Clara's voice used to be. He hadn't spoken her name aloud in months, not since the dream-started nights, where her face blurred into the current, pulling away like silt in the flow. The dog hadn't moved its flanks, rising and falling in shallow breaths, but its presence gnawed at him, a silent intruder in his carefully constructed numbness. Why here? Why now? Theo's mind whispered the questions, uncoiling like hooks in his gut. He shifted his weight, the dock creaking under him, and for a moment he met the dog's gaze eyes like shattered obsidian, holding a depth that made his chest ache. No tears came. They hadn't for years. Instead, a tremor ran through his hands, the rod slipping slightly, as if his body remembered grief, even if his heart had walled it away. The dog let out a low whine, barely audible over the water, but it sliced through Theo like a forgotten blade, stirring something he thought long drowned. He turned his back, staring at the horizon, where clouds gathered like regrets, but the silence between them cracked, inviting an unwelcome empathy that threatened to pull him under. As Theo reeled in his empty line, the mist thickened, wrapping the riverbank in a veil that blurred the pines into ghosts. The dog's head lifted, then ears pricking toward the water's heart, as if a whisper rose from the depths only it could hear. Theo paused, his pack slung over one shoulder, drawn by the intensity in those eyes, a focus that hinted at burdens, unspoken secrets submerged. Thunder grumbled low, a distant promise of upheaval, and the air hummed with electricity, making the hairs on Theo's arms stand. He felt it too, that pull, as if the river watched back its currents, hiding more than fish and forgotten lures. The dog's tail twitched once, a subtle sign, and Theo's breath hitched. Something was coming, not just the storm, but a shift that could upend his fragile world. He lingered a moment longer, the weight of that gaze anchoring him before turning away, the echo of possibility lingering like fog on his skin. The river had once been their sanctuary, a ribbon of silver where Theo and Clara built their world from laughter and lazy afternoons. He could still see her there in flashes, her hair catching the sun like spun gold as she baited her hook, her voice teasing him about his poor casts, the way her hand fit perfectly in his warm, against the chill of dawn. 5 years ago, on a night much like this, the storm had come swift and merciless. Her car skidded off the old bridge upstream, plunging into the depths that now mocked him with their calm. The divers found her too late, her face peaceful in the cold embrace, but Theo's light had drowned with her. Now the cabin they shared stood as a relic, its walls lined with faded photos. Clara smiling from the dock, her eyes alive with the future they planned children they never had. Theo avoided those walls, the dust gathering like unspoken regrets. The dog's presence by the river stirred something unwelcome, a ripple in his stasis, reminding him of how Clara would have approached it, coaxing with gentle words and open palms. He pushed the thought away, but it lingered like the scent of her perfume on old sweaters, pulling him back to a vitality long eclipsed. In the quiet hours he'd sit by the fire, fingers tracing the ring he still wore, wondering if the river held more than her memory, perhaps a way to feel again. But grief had anchored him, turning vibrant days to ash, and the dog's watchful eyes felt like an invitation to confront the emptiness he clung to for survival. Theo's days blurred into a monochrome routine, each one an echo of the last, designed to keep the world at arm's length. He'd rise before dawn, brew coffee that tasted like regret, and trudge to the dock with his gear slung over a shoulder that ached from years of casting into nothing. The cabin's emptiness pressed in empty chairs at the table, a bed too wide for one, the silence broken only by the creak of floorboards under his solitary steps. He avoided mirrors, unwilling to meet the hollow gaze staring back, the lines etched deeper since Clara's gone. Fishing wasn't for sustenance anymore. It was a defense, hours lost to the river's indifferent flow where thoughts could drift without landing. The town felt miles away, though it was just beyond the pines, pitying nods from old friends' whispers about the widower who never moved on. Theo armored himself with numbness, a wall built from skipped meals and sleepless nights. Dreams where Clara's hand slipped from his in the current. The dog's vigil disrupted this gray veil, its consistent presence a nagging question he couldn't ignore, like a crack in the ice threatening to shatter his fragile equilibrium. He left scraps by the bank once, watching from afar as the dog approached warily, but turned away before it could mean something. In the evenings he'd sit on the porch, the river's murmur a lullaby of loss, wondering if this was all that remained. A life frozen, waiting for a thaw he wasn't sure he deserved. The German shepherd's fur clung to its frame like a tattered cloak. Patches of black and tan dulled by neglect, scarred lines tracing across its flanks where chains had bitten deep. Mia, the park ranger, had spotted it first weeks ago, slinking through the pines like a shadow detached from its owner, her radio crackling as she noted its limp, a favoring of the hind leg that spoke of old fractures poorly healed. But it was the eyes that haunted her, polished obsidian, hollowed by betrayal, flinching at every rustle in the underbrush as if expecting a blow. In fragments of memory that the dog carried like invisible wounds, there was a yard of cracked earth and rusted wire where a man's voice thundered like storm clouds, his boots heavy with cruelty. The owner, Eli's uncle, though no one knew it yet, had prized the dog for its strength, training it with fists and withheld meals until one night, in a rage fueled by secrets he buried in the river, he cast it out. In the fading light of dusk, Theo and the dog existed as parallel silhouettes against the river's gleam, their emptiness woven into the same shadowed tapestry. Theo's cabin loomed behind him, its windows dark like unseeing eyes, while the dog hunkered on the bank, its posture a curve of guarded solitude that echoed Theo's slumped shoulders on the dock. Both flinched at sudden sounds, the crack of a branch for the dog, a distant car's rumble for Theo, instincts honed by lost walls built from the rubble of what was taken. He watched as the dog lapped tentatively at the water's edge, its tongue darting like a hesitant confession, mirroring how Theo sipped his coffee, savoring the bitterness as a stand-in for feeling. Their healing, if it could be called that, unfolded in silent symmetry. The dog's scars faded under new fur as days passed, just as Theo's tremors lessened when he gripped his rod, each small victory a step towards something unspoken. The sky split open with a crack that echoed through the pines, rain slamming down like judgment, turning the river from a murmur to a beast. Theo gripped his rod tighter, the dock slick underfoot, but his eyes locked on the boy Eli, small and reckless, skipping stones. Too close to the swelling edge, his laughter swallowed by the thunder. The current surged, foam-capped waves clawing at the bank, and in a breath Eli slipped his cry, piercing the chaos as the water yanked him under like a secret unearthed. From the shadows, the German shepherd exploded into motion, muscles rippling under scarred fur, leaping into the froth with a splash that sent spray arching high. Theo's heart hammered shock, freezing him as the dog's head bobbed in the torrent paws, churning toward the flailing boy, its bark a raw command against the roar. The air thickened with the scent of mud and ozone wind, whipping leaves like confetti in a storm, heightening the urgency that clawed at Theo's chest. River, though unnamed, yet fought the pull eyes fierce on Eli, a visual jolt that shattered Theo's numbness, the scene unfolding in suspended horror, the river's hunger palpable, demanding a choice he wasn't ready to make. Theo stood rooted on the dock, rain pelting his face like accusations, his mind a whirlwind of logic clashing with the raw pull of compassion. The river's fury mirrored his inner storm memories of Clara's car vanishing into the depths 5 years ago, the helplessness that had hollowed him, whispering that to dive in was to court loss again, to risk the fragile shell he'd built around his grief. Why him? Why now? His thoughts screamed, hands trembling, as he weighed the boy's distant thrash against his own terror, the dog's determined strokes a rebuke to his paralysis. But then the shepherd's eyes flicked back obsidian depths, locking onto Theo's. For a split second, a silent plea laced with desperation, its whine cutting through the gale like a thread of shared pain. Empathy surged, overriding the cold calculus of self-preservation, the dog's unyielding drive chipping at Theo's walls, reminding him of Clara's gentle insistence on kindness. Fear gripped him a vice around his chest, but that glance shifted everything, turning hesitation into a reluctant resolve, the conflict boiling down to one truth: in action would drown more than the boy, it would bury what remained of Theo's soul. Theo's breath exploded from his lungs as he leaped from the dock, the river's icy grip seizing him like a long-buried memory clawing free. Water crashed over his head, a chaotic symphony of roar and foam, his limbs thrashing against the current that pulled like invisible chains. Ahead, the dog's form cut through the torrent, its powerful strokes a beacon in the murk, ears flattened, muzzle dipping under waves, but surging back with unyielding resolve. Theo's mind raced, Clara's face flashing in the depths, her loss fueling his desperation, but he focused on the dog's lead, reaching out as Eli's small hand broke the surface, fingers splayed in terror. Together, man and beast converged on the boy. The dog latched onto Eli's collar with gentle teeth, towing him toward Theo's outstretched arms. Mud slicked their skins, the rescue a mess of slips and gasps. Theo's shoulder slamming a submerged rock pane blooming like fire, the dog yelping as a branch raked its side. But they pressed on. Theo hoisting Eli's limp weight, the boy's coughs ragged against his chest, water streaming from them like shed regrets. They broke the surface on the bank, collapsing in a heap of heaving breaths and trembling limbs, the flood's rage mocking their fragility. The dog's eyes met Theo's, then a spark of something irreversible igniting the act, not clean but raw, a commitment forged in the chaos marking the shift from spectator to savior. The rain eased to a drizzle as they huddled on the muddy bank, the river's roar fading to a sullen grumble, leaving only the scent of wet earth and exhaustion in its wake. Theo knelt beside Eli, his hands still shaking from the cold and adrenaline pressing against the boy's back, coaxing out the last of the water with gentle pats, the child's gasps a fragile melody of survival. The dog shook itself, fur slick and matted like a warrior's battered armor, droplets flying in arcs that caught the dim light. Without thinking, Theo shrugged off his jacket heavy with river water and draped it over the dog's shivering frame. The animal didn't flinch, didn't growl, but leaned ever so slightly into the warmth, its eyes softening from fierce to watchful. Eli stirred small arms, wrapping around the dog's neck, whispering thanks into its ear, the words muffled but sincere, drawing a low rumble from the beast. Not threat, but acknowledgement. Theo's throat tightened, a spark igniting in his chest, purpose flickering like a distant lantern in his long, dark world. He reached out tentatively, fingers brushing the dog's head, and murmured, "River, that's what I'll call you." The name hung in the air, a promise woven from the moment's threads, fragile as mist, but binding them in silent accord. Mia appeared, then her ranger's truck rumbling up the path, flashlight cutting through the gloom, but Theo barely noticed his focus on River's steady gaze, the first tendrils of trust curling like vines around their shared vulnerability. The boy clung tighter, River standing guard, and Theo felt the weight of isolation lift, if only a fraction the act of care, sealing a bond that whispered of healing yet to come, shadowed by the river's lingering secrets. Days blurred into a tentative rhythm. After the flood, the river's banks scarred with debris like fresh wounds. But Theo's cabin became an unspoken sanctuary, where River lingered on the fringes. The dog claimed the porch's shadowed corner body curled tight as a fist, eyes tracking Theo's every move with a wariness that hummed like low thunder. When Theo approached with a bowl of scraps, bits of fish and bread softened in broth, the air thickened. River's lips curling back in a silent growl, teeth glinting like unsheathed blades, a reminder of chains and blows that still echoed in its bones. Theo halted mid-step, the bowl placed gently on the weathered planks, retreating without a word, respecting the invisible line drawn in the dirt. Mia stopped by once, her truck crunching gravel, her voice soft as she noted River's scars anew. He's healing, but trust is a slow current. In the hush of afternoons, Theo mended his nets by the cabin's side, the river's gentle lap a backdrop to the quiet that enveloped him and River like a shared cloak. The dog lay a few paces away, body relaxed, but eyes vigilant, its flanks rising and falling in rhythm with Theo's steady breaths, as if their pains harmonized in the stillness. No words passed between them. Theo's internal whispers of Clara's absence, her laughter now a ghost in the wind, mirrored in River's subtle flinches at phantom threats, scars from an owner whose cruelty lingered like silt in the soul. When Theo pricked his finger on a hook, blood welling like a suppressed tear, River's ears perked, a soft whine escaping its muzzle, inching closer without crossing the divide. The air held the scent of pine and damp fur, sensory threads weaving their unspoken wounds. Theo's isolation a deep gash from lost, River's mistrust, a lattice of betrayals both healing and parallel through mere presence. Mia observed from afar, once her binoculars catching the scene, noting how River's gaze softened when Theo hummed an old tune, a melody Clara loved, the dog's tail twitching faintly, as if recognizing the melody of grief. Their connection deepened in these moments, shared glances across the grass. Theo pausing his work to meet River's eyes, finding in them a reflection of his own hollow ache. No touch yet, but the silence grew warmer. A bridge built from mutual suffering where empathy flowed like the river's undercurrent, pulling them toward something fragile and real. The snap echoed like a bone breaking, the old fishing rod giving way under Theo's frustrated tug, splintered wood scattering across the dock like fragments of a forgotten life. He froze, the sound ripping open a seam in his memory. Clara's hands over his, warm and steady, guiding his cast into the sunset-gilded river, her laughter bubbling like the current when he'd hooked nothing but weeds. "Patience, Theo." She'd whisper, her breath against his ear, a balm to his impatience, those moments now drowned in the years since her car had vanished into the depths. The rod's ruin felt like an accusation, his hands trembling as grief surged unbidden, a wave crashing against the walls he'd built. River, lounging in the grass nearby, jolted upright at the crack, a sharp bark bursting from its throat, raw and instinctive, echoing the yelp of past pains under a cruel hand. But then the dog paused, head tilted, obsidian eyes locking onto Theo's bowed form, the bark trailing into a low whine that hummed with something deeper than alarm. As dusk painted the river in strokes of amber and indigo, Theo sat on the bank, a piece of bread and fish cradled in his palm, the air humming with the last sighs of summer crickets, chirping like distant memories, the water's surface rippling gently under a cooling breeze. River approached warily, nose twitching at the scent wafting on the wind, its eyes flickering between Theo's face and the offering shadows of mistrust lingering like fading bruises. Theo's heart thudded softly, his internal monologue a whisper of doubt. Would this be the moment? It snapped, teeth bared in reflex, but he held steady, palm open like an invitation to a dance long avoided. River paused, flanks quivering, then stepped forward, muzzle dipping to take the food without a growl, lips brushing Theo's skin in a touch as light as Clara's fingers, tracing his jaw on lazy evenings. The dog's tongue was rough, warm a spark igniting in the cool twilight, and Theo exhaled a breath he hadn't known. He held the gesture, unlocking a warmth that spread through his chest like sunlight piercing clouds. The cabin's fire crackled low that evening, casting flickering shadows across the walls like restless memories, the scent of burning pine mingling with the damp earth outside, where the river whispered its endless tales. Theo sat in his worn armchair, a book forgotten in his lap, his mind drifting through the haze of another day. Without Clara, her absence, a hollow ache that the flames couldn't warm. River had ventured inside for the first time, drawn by the heat, or perhaps something deeper circling the room with cautious steps, before settling on the rug body still coiled with residual wariness. The air hung heavy, charged with unspoken histories. Theo's fingers idly tracing the armrest where Clara's hand once rested, River's ears twitching at every pop from the hearth echoes of shouts and chains that still haunted its dreams. Then, without prelude, River rose, padding silently across the floor, its obsidian eyes meeting Theo's, in a gaze that held the weight of shared silences. Theo held his breath, heart stuttering as the dog leaned in, resting its massive head on his knee with a sigh that seemed to release years of guarded tension. Moonlight filtered through the pines like fractured promises, casting elongated shadows across the cabin's floor, where Theo tossed in fitful sleep, dreams laced with Clara's sinking car and the river's mocking pull. River curled at the bed's foot, stirred first ears, pricking body tensing like a bowstring drawn tight, a low growl rumbling from its throat as if scenting ghosts on the wind. The night air hummed with subtle unease, leaves rustling not from breeze but something heavier, footsteps perhaps echoing faintly from the riverbank, where the flood's scars still lingered in uprooted roots and silted paths. River paced to the window hackles rising in a ridge along its spine, obsidian eyes piercing the darkness, its stillness a primal alert that prickled Theo's skin even in slumber. A distant snap, a twig under boot sent the dog into rigid silence, nose flaring at the scent of intrusion, instincts honed from years of abuse flaring like embers stirred. Theo awoke with a start. Heart pounding, the room's quiet, now laced with tension, River's growl vibrating through the floorboards, directed at shadows that danced unnaturally outside. Mia had mentioned rumors in town, a stranger asking about the river, Eli's family ties unspoken, but looming yet here in the witching hour, it manifested as River's unwavering stare, body language screaming of peril before words could form. The dog's posture shifted the haven to a watchful vigil, its stillness a harbinger echoing the traumas that had bound them, now resurfacing like debris in the current. The afternoon sun slanted through the pines like accusing fingers, casting long shadows over the riverbank where Theo and River walked in companionable silence, the dog's stride now synced with his own. But then a figure emerged from the tree line, tall, broad-shouldered, with a gait that carried the weight of unspoken malice, Eli's uncle, the man whose face Theo had glimpsed only in faded town gossip, now materializing like a specter from the depths. River froze first, body rigid as stone, a guttural snarl ripping from its throat lips, peeling back to reveal fangs, honed by survival, its eyes blazing with recognition that ignited like dry tinder. The uncle halted, his smirk faltering as River's hackles rose in a ridge of fury, the dog's protective stance shifting forward, placing itself between Theo and the intruder, instincts flaring in a maternal ferocity that belied its scars. The river's surface churned uneasily under the gathering clouds, as if sensing the storm of revelations brewing, the air thick with the metallic tang of impending rain and unresolved tension. Eli's uncle returned that evening, bolder now, his truck rumbling up the gravel path to Theo's cabin, headlights slicing the dusk like knives, his figure stepping out with a purposeful menace that made the pines seem to whisper warnings. Recognition hit like a thunderclap. River's body went rigid, a deep resonant growl vibrating through the ground, its eyes narrowing to slits of pure instinct, identifying the abuser instantly, the scent of old cruelty triggering a primal standoff. Theo emerged from the door, Mia at his side after a hurried call, her ranger's badge glinting faintly, but the confrontation was immediate. The uncle's voice boomed, "That dog's mine and the boy's comin' with me, family business." his stance aggressive fists, bald eyes darting to the river where secrets lay buried. Theo's pulse thundered, emotions surging in waves. Fear for Eli, rage for Clara. A protective fire igniting as he faced the man linked to her death, his voice cracking, "You killed her, didn't you? Covered it up in that damn river." The uncle sneered, advancing a step. "Accidents happen, old man, stay out of it." But River exploded forward, positioning between them, teeth bared in a snarl that echoed years of torment, its body a shield of fur and fury. The rain tapered to a misty veil as the uncle's truck vanished into the night taillights, bleeding red into the darkness like fading wounds, leaving the riverbank steeped in a heavy silence, broken only by the water's subdued murmur. Theo sank to his knees in the mud body, racked with tremors, the confrontation's aftermath crashing over him like delayed waves, regret for unspoken accusations, guilt over Clara's unresolved end, his shouts echoing in his mind as hollow as the cabin's empty rooms. Mia holstered her weapon, her voice soft but urgent over the radio, summoning authorities to dredge the exposed car. But she knelt beside Theo, a hand on his shoulder. "It's over for tonight. Justice will come." River flanks heaving from the standoff circled once before pressing close, its massive frame leaning into Theo's side head, nudging under his arm in a gesture of quiet solidarity. The dog's warmth seeped through Theo's soaked shirt, a physical anchor grounding him as sobs choked his throat, tears mingling with rain on his face, the separation from the threat allowing vulnerability to surface. Dawn broke uneasy over the river, the mist clinging low like unspoken fears, but the day unraveled into tension as subtle signs wove a web of dread around Theo's cabin. River sensed it first, body tensing mid-stride during their morning walk, ears swiveling toward the pines where a branch snapped unnaturally its growl, a low vibration that prickled Theo's skin. Footprints appeared near the dock, fresh boot-treaded imprints in the soft mud circling the property like a predator's prowl. Eli's uncle's scent lingering, faintly detected only by River's keen nose flaring in alert. Mia radioed warnings the man had vanished from town, whispers of his desperation over the emerging car evidence fueling a vengeful return, her truck patrolling but unable to shadow every shadow. River's instincts sharpened, hackles rising at dusk's approach, pacing the porch with watchful eyes scanning the tree-lined body language, a tapestry of unease. Tail-low muscles coiled, a silent sentinel, echoing the river's restless churn below. Theo felt it too, his hands unsteady on his fishing gear, glances darting to the water where the dredge team worked buoys, marking the submerged secret like omens. Birds fell silent abruptly, their absence a signal in the thickening air, and River's sudden stillness, staring fixedly at a rustle in the underbrush, confirmed the stalker's proximity, the threat building like storm clouds massing. Twilight bled into night, the river's surface a mirror of inky blackness fractured by moonlight, but the calm shattered as Eli's uncle burst from the tree line, his face twisted in desperation, a glint of metal in his hand. A knife perhaps, or something worse. His voice a venomous hiss. "You should have stayed out of it, old man. The boy knows too much, and that mutt's coming with me." The threat crystallized, explicit and unavoidable, his advance toward Eli, who cowered by the dock, playing innocently, until now the child's wide eyes reflecting the imminent peril like the river's depths. River reacted instantly, a blur of fur and fury positioning between the uncle and Eli, hackles raised like a crown of thorns, a deep resonant growl rumbling from its chest that vibrated the air body low and ready for the lunge. Theo's heart seized, internal storm raging, Clara's face flashing in his mind her loss, a physical ache now amplified by the fear of losing this fragile new family as he grabbed a nearby oar, stepping forward, voice cracking, "You won't touch them." The uncle laughed, a hollow bark echoing over the water, but his eyes darted nervously to River's bared teeth, the dog's stance unyielding muscles rippling under scarred coat, a living barrier against the man's advance. Mia's truck lights pierced the gloom from afar, but she was minutes away. The confrontation raw and immediate. The uncle feinting left knife slashing air, forcing River to snap jaws, closing on sleeve fabric with a rip that drew blood, the struggle erupting in grunts and snarls. In the heart of the melee, time stretched like the river's endless flow, Theo's mind a whirlwind of decision. Protect or flee, commit or lose, as the uncle wrested free from River's grip, blood streaming from his arm knife flashing toward Eli's trembling form by the water's edge. Theo's breath caught Clara's voice echoing in his head. Fight for what's yours, her loss a catalyst transforming fear into resolve, his body moving before thought could catch up. He dropped the oar, lunging forward with bare hands, tackling the uncle from behind, the impact jarring his bones like a plunge into icy depths, their bodies tumbling toward the mud-slick bank. River circled, snarling, but held back, instincts yielding to Theo's lead, the dog's eyes locked on Eli, ensuring the boy's safety amid the chaos. The uncle twisted knife, arcing wildly, grazing Theo's side in a hot line of pain that bloomed like fireblood soaking his shirt, but Theo pinned the man's wrist, grinding it into the earth, voice raw. Enough. The cabin's door creaked open slowly, admitting the first pale light of morning, as Theo eased himself onto the porch steps, his side bandaged tightly under Mia's careful hands from the night before the sting, a dull reminder rather than a sharp alarm. River padded out behind him, movements ginger and deliberate, a fresh wrap around its foreleg where the knife had grazed the fabric clean against its fur, absorbing the quiet dew that clung to everything like unshed tears. Eli slept inside, curled on the couch under a blanket, his breaths even and untroubled, now the crisis's echo fading into the soft rhythm of recovery. Theo sat motionless for a long while, staring at the river's glassy surface, calm after the tumult, its flow a gentle murmur that seemed to apologize for the secrets it had held. His hands rested limp in his lap. No tremor now, just a heavy stillness that allowed thoughts to settle like silt. Clara's face in the water's reflection, softer, somehow less accusatory. Mia had left at dawn, promising updates on the uncle's arrest. Her truck's rumble fading into the pines, leaving only the faint scent of antiseptic and coffee in the air. River settled beside him, not touching, but close enough for warmth to bridge the gap, its eyes half closed in weary vigilance, the pair decompressing in tandem breaths, syncing with the world's slow awakening. Days unfolded with a steady, unhurried tempo, the river's constant hum a backdrop to the subtle dance of recovery between Theo and River, their bond deepening through interwoven threads of behavior and quiet emotion. Theo rose each morning to brew coffee, the steam curling like gentle exhalations, and River would follow him to the kitchen, paws soft on the wooden floor, its presence a shadow that no longer loomed, but comforted eyes meeting his in brief, meaningful contact that spoke of shared burdens lightening. He'd pour kibble into the bowl, fingers lingering as River ate slowly, muzzle dipping, with less hesitation, the crunch of food mingling with the scent of pine wafting through the open window, a sensory tapestry weaving trust into routine. Afternoons found them on the dock, Theo casting lines with hands steadier than before, River lying close, fur brushing his leg, in accidental touches that evolved into intentional leans, the warmth seeping through denim like a balm on old aches. Eli visited often, his laughter a bright note, tossing sticks for River to fetch the dog's tail wagging in earnest, now muscles rippling under healing scars as it bounded back, dropping the prize at Theo's feet with a look that invited participation, their eyes locking in moments of unspoken gratitude. Mia stopped by with updates, the car-dredged evidence sealing the uncle's fate, her voice blending with the river's flow, but Theo's focus remained on River, noting how the dog no longer flinched at sudden sounds, its ears perking instead in curiosity, mirroring Theo's own softening, the nightmares less frequent, replaced by dreams of Clara smiling from the bank. Small gestures accumulated, Theo scratching behind River's ears. During evenings by the fire, the dog's sigh a release of tension for soft under calloused fingers, the crackle of logs sinking with their breaths, emotion rising in waves of contentment. The sun dipped low, gilding the river in hues of molten gold, as Theo and River walked the familiar bank, their steps synchronized in a rhythm born of countless shared dawns. Theo paused, kneeling to skim a hand over the water's surface, fingers trailing ripples that spread like whispers of release. His breath, steady eyes reflecting the glint that once held only sorrow, but now carried a quiet light. River halted beside him, body brushing Theo's side, and then, unexpected, profound, the dog turned its head, resting it gently on Theo's outstretched hand, muzzle warm against palm eyes, locking in a gaze that pierced the veil of remaining fears. The motion was intimate, deliberate river's breath, feathering across skin obsidian depths, softening with total surrender, a symbolic yielding that dissolved the last shadows of mistrust. Theo's throat tightened, emotion swelling in a cathartic wave, tears blurring the horizon as grief's echo faded to a faint murmur. Clara's memory no longer a chain but a gentle current guiding forward.